Hi, everyone. Welcome into Monsoon 2026, a deep dive into all of the elements of Arizona's summer thunderstorm season by your First Alert Weather Team. I'm McLaughlin.
And I'm Holly Bock. This year, we are putting together a series of shows, each episode dedicated to a different aspect of our summer monsoon.
And there's a lot of them, right? We're going to give you an inside look on how our weather pattern makes a seasonal shift to deliver much needed moisture all across our state. But these summer storms can come fast and they can pack a punch in a variety of different ways.
So in this episode, we will concentrate on one of the most jaw-dropping parts of our severe weather season. These are the filthy monsters of the monsoon, an eye-opening spectacle that our bone-dry desert provides almost every summer. We're talking about dust storms, the massive walls of airborne sand and dirt. They can soar up from the ground to thousands of feet in the air and stretch for dozens of miles.
People that just moved here, they're looking at this video going, wait a minute, what planet are we on? The largest ones are deemed, it's a funny word, it's called Haboobs, a term used since the 1970s to describe the ones that actually swallow the city and blot out the sun, grinding everything to a standstill. But the worst part, visibility drops like that in an instant, and it can be deadly if you're caught in one behind the wheel.
Yeah, our towering thunderstorms, they are fueled by triple-digit temperatures and sweltering humidity, collapse and they roll the dust from farm fields and open desert from the south. A big one, it hit the Phoenix metro area and parts of Pinal County in August, marking the largest and first major haboob in 2025. It left tens of thousands of homes and businesses without power into the night and caused extensive delays at Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport as flights were grounded.
Now, this is what the Sun Devil football team experienced at their practice inside Mountain America Stadium. I mean, look at that wall of dust. It was choking, turning the day into night and forcing players inside the practice facility. Now, it seems like the Sun Devils, they've been a little bit snake bit as of late. Back in 2023, the Sun Devils home opener, that was Kenny Dillingham's debut as head coach. It was paused for 2 hours at halftime. Look at this video as a massive wall of dust covered the entire stadium. Fans, they ran out of the stands, sought shelter inside the concourse as dust filled Frank Cush Field there. It was rocked by dangerous lightning and eventually some rain. But the Devils had the last laugh. Look at that kickoff. It won their home opener 24-21 at 1 a.m. the next morning.
Talk about a game you'll never forget.
You will never forget that. So how do they form? Let me walk over to the big green wall and show you what I'm talking about here. It all has to do with our summer heat and these towering thunderstorms. Remember, our desert heat can get 110, 115. It can soar these massive thunderstorms up into the atmosphere 30, 40,000 feet. There's a ton of cold air and ice at the top part of the cloud. Well, what happens is that cold, dense, heavy air, it's got to go somewhere in the collapse of these thunderstorms, which is right straight out the bottom of the cloud. And when they come out of the bottom of the cloud, it really rolls up this wall of dust from that dry desert and the farm fields, like Holly mentioned, to the south part of the valley. And let me tell you, this is where it can be deadly. It is hazardous driving conditions with limited, Holly, if not zero visibility at times when these hit the Valley of the Sun.
Yeah, see, these dust storms, they just happen so fast, and it obviously makes those driving conditions really tough, really dangerous. Most importantly, you should never intentionally drive into a dust storm. If you can, you want to avoid it. But if you do find yourself stuck, here is what you need to know. You'll want to pull off the road as far as possible and stop your car. You'll want to turn your lights off and set the emergency brake. Take your foot off of the brake pedal to be sure the tail lights are not illuminated. Now, if you for some reason are not able to pull off the roadway, this does happen to people, you just want to go slow, turn on your lights and honk occasionally, never stop in the middle of the roadway. So important because seeing these things come quick and people sometimes just get stuck.
Yeah, now these walls of dust, they're a little bit easier to understand. Meteorologists will now be using a brand new dust storm ranking system with input from a lot of local meteorologists to classify the severity similar to kind of a ranking scale like tornadoes or hurricanes. And the main goal, of course, behind all of this is safety. And the man that knows all about it is joining us now. This is Dr. Randy Cerveny. This is a guy over at ASU. He's a President's Scholar. He's a published author. You've seen him worldwide on many of the specials on the Weather Channel. But last but not least, he is really, for dozens and dozens of meteorologists that are working in all of the fields, this is the guy that has been influencing them since the 1990s. It's great to see you. Good to see you.
Randy, thank you for being here with us. We're excited to learn more about the dust storm scale. So like Sean said, similar to you hear about tornadoes and hurricanes being ranked. Now we'll have that ranking system similar to that for dust storms here in Phoenix. So let's talk about the categories that we have for this scale.
Well, we had input from almost, as Sean was saying, everybody that's associated with weather here in the Valley. We have ASU, of course, we have National Weather Service, we have the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, we've got the Maricopa County Flood Control District, a bunch of people that, SRP, the Power Water Facility, a bunch of people had input into how we're going to rank these things. We needed that because a lot of organizations and a lot of groups need to have that information in order to better prepare themselves for a coming monsoon and know how bad it actually can be. So what we've done is we've ranked storms based on a scale from 1 to 5. Okay. And it's primarily based on concentration, on dust concentration. How much dust is in a specific cube, if you will. It's called PM10. It's the particulates that make up very often what you hear about in terms of air quality.
Yeah, bad air quality.
The measurements that are done there. Well, we look at those measurements. We also take into account how widespread that dust is, how strong the winds are, and also how strong or how widespread are the actual winds themselves. We put all that information together and we have a scale that ranks from 1 to 5. And we've looked at dust storms over the last 16 years now.
Right.
And based on this scale, there was like 128 some odd storms that we've looked at over the last 16 years. We have only 3 that have ranked out at our top category, which is category 5.
Wow. So let's give kind of a different example. Just a few minutes ago, we were rolling the tape of the August 2025 dust storm, and you would rank that as a category 2?
That was a category 2.
Give us that reason, because last year, everyone thought, man, that was a big one. In fact, here's some video from it.
Yes. And again, we're based off of concentration. Now, part of it is the instrumentation that we have to use to measure that concentration. The concentration by our measurements from the Arizona Department of Air Quality have to be in the air for an hour long.
Okay.
That storm was a very fast-moving storm, and immediately after the storm came through, it rained. So it dropped out that dust. So yes, we had this impressive dust storm come through, but it only lasted for a few minutes.
Yeah.
Now, the other storm that you were talking about, the one that hit ASU back in 2023,
yes,
that
opener.
That actually classified out as a category 5. Our worst category 5, however, was the infamous July 5th, 2011 storm. And that's the one that made worldwide coverage when it came through. The videos that were associated with that 2011 storm were absolutely riveting.
For all of our newcomers here, that's the video that you're showing right there. Holly, they nicknamed this one the dust storm that swallowed Phoenix. And Randy was right. This thing had worldwide attention.
Yeah, and it's an impressive because for people who aren't from here, it's like light turns to dark within sometimes seconds and minutes. And so it makes sense why this one would be classified as a Cat 5. Why is it so important? Obviously, like you were saying, for tornadoes, we don't learn that it's an EF1 or whatever, maybe for 24 or 48 hours. So why is it important for us to learn a day or 2 days what this is classified as?
Well, the key will be that we can use it, in my sense, primarily for research purposes. We can start to say what causes the big dust storms as opposed to the smaller dust storms. What differentiates, what kind of conditions are associated with the larger dust storms and smaller dust storms? Are we having larger, more frequent dust storms? That's the kind of stuff that a ranking system can tell us. Prior to this, we had anecdotal accounts that say, oh yeah, this was a bad dust storm or this wasn't. But now we can actually physically put numbers to these, and that's going to make a big difference in the way that we can study and analyze these storms.
And we've got a couple of minutes left here, Dr. Cerveny. What's going to move the needle for these state agencies and the federal government for funding air quality research and for funding better gas emissions and things like that? This ranking is really going to help kind of move that needle, correct?
Right. And that's one of the reasons why we developed this, is because groups like the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality that gauge and monitor our air have to be able to distinguish between what is quote, quote, normal pollution, the pollution that we put out with cars, from what they call exceptional events. Exceptional events are dust storms. If the two get mixed together, it becomes hard for agencies to be able to say, oh, okay, we need this money because we're combating pollution. Well, if it takes into account dust storms, those are natural. And so we have to have that kind of thing in order to better monitor our air quality. And this is going to be really helpful because after every exceedance that occurs, every air quality exceedance occurs, the people at the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality have to put out a report to the EPA and say, this was the result of either our own pollution efforts here, or it was a result of a natural event. This is going to help.
Something you guys have been working on for years now. I think it will interest a lot of people to see a dust storm come in and say, actually, hey, you know, what category is that one and why? I think a lot of people will be really interested in that. So, Dr. Cerveny, thank you so much for being here with us today.
My pleasure.
Calling up your family. I just survived the Category 5 dust storm.
There you go.
The Dean of the Monsoon, Dr. Randy Cerveny, we appreciate your time and effort. Still ahead, weary of numerous crashes on I-10, ADOT came up with a unique high-tech plan aimed at getting ahead of those storms to slow drivers down before the dust hit. Well, part of it worked, but as our Arizona Family Investigates team discovered, part of it never made it online after millions of taxpayer money was spent. That story coming up next.
Storm Commander, one of the ways Arizona's family first alerts you to weather changes. Live in the moment, giving you up-to-the-minute weather conditions so you and your family can prepare for what's next.
Sponsored by SRP, only on Arizona's Family.
It's unacceptable that it had been this long.
That was Congressman Greg Stanton, irritated at the National Weather Service and our state's Department of Transportation after Arizona's family uncovered problems getting a brand new Doppler radar site online to spot dust storms along a brutal stretch of I-10 south of the valley. The radar was basically the crown jewel of ADOT's award-winning dust detection system.
A series of ground monitors that would sound the alarm and automatically change the speed limit on an 11-mile stretch of the I-10 between Eloy and Picacho Peak, known to be home to several deadly accidents. But as Arizona's Family Investigates team discovered, despite millions of taxpayer money spent on this, the X-band Doppler radar was never fully operational and is now being decommissioned.
And so joining us now, we have our investigative reporter, Morgan Lowe, and our senior investigative producer, Cody Lilich here, who has been reporting on this for years now to kind of break down this latest change in this investigation.
Yeah, this was such a big problem there. It was so dangerous that over the course of 5 years, from 2010 to 2015, there were 85 serious crashes in that area. So the Department of Transportation came up with this really revolutionary idea to combine ground sensors, some speed limit signs that could change the speed limit and slow everybody down. And that crown jewel was this X-band Doppler radar. Would have been the first state transportation agency to run an X-band Doppler radar. And it was great. They got a federal contract for $6.5 million to put all this in. It went in. It looked awesome.
Yeah.
Except it never got going. The ground sensors and the adjustable speed limit signs worked, but they never got that radar fully functional. And that's when we found out. And the first responders out there, the Eloy Fire District, they never knew that radar wasn't working. I mean, you're the one, you and Royal found out about it.
And it's because minutes matter. I mean, minutes in any sort of situation, especially when you go from 10-mile visibility to 0-mile visibility at freeway speeds, minutes can mean lives.
Yeah, and so they just never really figured out how to get that radar to talk to ADOT to talk to the National Weather Service. I mean, that was really the problem. It was like they were all speaking different languages, and they never really got it going right.
And did we ever find out why that was? How is it not possible to make that work? Because we know that's an area where the radar in Phoenix and in Tucson have a hard time reaching this spot. So this would have been extremely helpful in that.
Yeah, and really that was because of the topography in between the two areas. And really the issue and why the decommissioning is happening is because of the delay. So we were able to see the radar sweep happening and the radar functioning, but it was at too slow of a rate for it to be of any use by the time the data got to the National Weather Service.
And Cody, we kind of call you our document guru. You were able to do what's called a FOIA request, which is Freedom of Information, and you uncovered, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of pages. I mean, this is the memos going back and forth between these two agencies. Did it look like people were just pointing fingers, or were they really trying to get this thing solved?
They were trying to get it solved, and especially once we started asking questions and Congressman Stanton started, demanding answers from the National Weather Service and to a lesser extent, the Arizona Department of Transportation, since he has federal oversight. But, it was really what is being spent now, and that's something that we uncovered, that money was still being spent even though the Doppler radar site wasn't being utilized.
And you guys have talked to a handful of people who have their hands in this project. Have they looked at it and thought, how can we get this thing to work at some point, or why are we so stuck? Will that ever change?
They did get the machines to talk to each other. They just couldn't get it quite right. And I think one of the real disappointments now in public safety and meteorology here in Arizona is that it does appear that this was kind of a wasted opportunity. Like
really
there was
wasted.
So much potential there. And there is some real, we've talked to people, there is some disappointment that they pulled the plug too early. The Department of Transportation is saying this was a pilot project. We got it going, we looked at it, and we got the data, and it does not make sense to continue with it. It won't do enough of a benefit. And the question we're hearing is, how do we know?
Right.
We haven't had a really bad dust storm season in that area since then. And so that's kind of the disappointment I've heard out there.
So for our viewers out there, because this would kind of fill in a blind spot, it's south of Marana, north of Marana, north of Picacho Peak, south of Eloy. It's about an 11-mile stretch that our Doppler radar systems between Tucson and Phoenix kind of overshoot because of the curvature of the earth. So if we had that operating, we could really get kind of a 5 to 10 minute head start on some of these storms that roll up that dust. But now here we are getting ready for monsoon 2026, and now we're being told that it's going to be completely decommissioned and basically abandoned, but yet taxpayer money is still on the hook. How did you discover that?
Yeah, so this was installed by a radar company out of Alabama. They have been doing, and I mentioned the money being spent while the radar was not working or being observed at ADOT and the Weather Service. State records showed that ADOT was actually paying $19,000 and $20,000 a year for a maintenance contract through this radar vendor, and actually maintained the radar even though they weren't seeing anything at ADOT or the Weather Service, and those timely alerts weren't being given based on the radar data itself, just based on the other parts of the system. And we've actually found out that maintenance contract, even though the decommissioning was announced in April, just 2 months prior in February, the maintenance contract was extended all the way until 2027.
And I drove by it this weekend, and
yeah,
it's still there. Looks the same. Cody found out there's no real plan right now to take it down.
No timeline and no estimated any cost on if the company is going to charge anything to come back and take that radar out of service.
Something people on the freeway definitely can't miss as you're driving by.
And millions of your taxpayer money, a really wasted opportunity.
Yeah, we don't know how much the actual radar cost. The whole project was $6.5 million, but that included those ground sensors and those speed limit signs, which they have said work and have done a good job. The question is, how much better could it have been if they really got that working?
And those were all in the moment. They can only warn when the dust is already there. This radar was seen as a prediction tool and to see it when it was miles away. So without that, we lose the prediction ability.
Would have definitely been helpful. Thank you guys for all of the research you've done. Thanks for being here with us. Still to come, we have meteorologist Pete Mangione coming in to talk about the number of health problems caused by dust storm. He's joined by a local doctor to dive into the symptoms to watch for and simple steps to protect you and your family before the next wall of dust moves in.
Welcome back to our monsoon special. I'm meteorologist Pete Mangione. We are talking about dust, and I'm going to be specifically talking about dust and your health. So I want to welcome in Dr. Jay Patel. He's an allergist here in Arizona. Dr. Patel, thanks so much for joining us here on the monsoon special.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Pete. I'm always happy to.
All right, so here's what I want to get into. McLaughlin, my meteorologist and colleague, he did a great story last year about the potential of some extra ER visits after a dust storm. He referenced a study where you may see an increase of 6% increase of visits after a dust storm for things like asthma. Anecdotally, do you see things like this after one of these dust storms?
Definitely. I mean, I think even the 6%, just if I were to have to guess a percentage, I would say the 6%, it sounds a little low to me, because when we have either monsoon season or just like dust storms like this, we see a very quick uptick in our asthma and just like allergy and sinus type of cases who are walking in the door.
So, I mean, is there any kind of recommendation you can give other than, stay inside, especially if you're prone to respiratory issues?
For sure. I mean, I think a lot of us have to be outdoors and can't just live our whole life outside. So what I would say is, like, if you know that there's a dust storm coming or it's going to be windy, one of the easiest things that you could do would be to wear a mask, particularly if you're someone who's prone to having any type of asthma flare, COPD, any type of lung conditions. So wearing a mask can help just prevent that direct, inhalation of these type of particulate matters that was talked about earlier on this segment. So that's the first thing that I would do. And then just making sure, if you're someone who is supposed to be on, or maybe it's been recommended that you carry an inhaler for your asthma, for example, making sure that, you have that. And when you leave the house for the day, you don't forget those things at home, just that extra bit of caution when you go out to be able to help yourself if you do experience symptoms.
Now, let's say you're someone that's not prone to allergies and you're thinking, okay, I'm healthy, I'm fine. I imagine even for a very healthy person, getting these dust particles in your lungs is still not good for you.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, this is a good example of something around here when we see things like valley fever, and that can happen to anyone, even if you don't have any history of asthma or any sort of problem and you're just a healthy person or a child. So that is definitely not healthy. And even if it's not something as severe as getting an actual infection of valley fever, just the particulate matters and irritant, our lungs don't like having that. And so when you take a breath in, your air is going to make it all the way down into your lung, and that can be very irritating to the lungs. So that can create symptoms like coughing, shortness of breath, even sometimes wheezing, even for patients who don't really have that past, diagnosis of any sort of problem.
All right, Dr. Patel, this is great information. Thanks so much for joining us on our monsoon special. And now we're going to get to the exciting part of the special, the forecast. Let's go to Holly and Scene.
Hey, Pete. Yeah, it's exciting to see what is to come when we look at the monsoon. Of course, every year is so different. So what we're looking at is this year's outlook regarding our temperatures. So what it's showing is that it could be warmer than normal during this monsoon, maybe not as hot as previous years. If you remember summer 2025, that went down as the 4th hottest on record. And how could we forget summer 2024, which went down as the hottest year on record, 113 consecutive days at or over 100 degrees and 70 days at 110 or warmer.
Well, let's talk about the thunderstorm activity and why it's so important. Remember, our monsoon gives us about 1/3 of our average annual rainfall. It's an incredibly important to our entire state, agricultural, you name it. Thunderstorm activity, the green you see over the state of Arizona, it means a more active monsoon than normal. Now, these are strong signs, or there are strong signs, I should say, that of better chances for above average rainfall for all of Arizona, but even more so for northeastern Arizona. On average, Phoenix gets a little more than 2 inches of rain during our monsoon, but about 1/3 of our total annual precipitation. So again, if we were to believe this forecast, and it's been tough to kind of really pin down the monsoon, especially over the last 10 years, this bodes well for our farmers and our state's agricultural areas, because we need the rain. We're always perpetually in drought here in the Valley of the Sun.
Absolutely, and there are a lot of different opinions on why, we're leaning above normal for precipitation. We had someone on one of our previous monsoon specials that says it's actually the lack of snowpack.
Oh, wow.
Maybe some of the dry soil moistures right now that can actually help fuel more rainfall during the monsoon. So again, a lot of different factors, not a lot of certainty, but it's nice to see those dark greens and blues on the precipitation map.
It is nice. Obviously, it's an outlook and things can change, but we often use these to kind of give a heads up of what could be to come as we head into the monsoon. So it's interesting to see warmer than average temperatures likely and above average rainfall.
And of course, we've been concentrating on dust and dust storms. Pull over. You want to arrive safely to your destination and keep it here on Arizona's Family. We will, of course, have live coverage anytime these storms hit. And when they do, they come fast and quick. So on behalf of all of us here in the First Alert Weather Team, thanks for joining us for our First Alert Monsoon 2026.